And welcome to Headlines. Frankie Darcell with you, and thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. And of course, right around the corner, May 21st, it is Election Day, and want to make sure that you hear from the candidates directly. And I thank each of the candidates for agreeing to do the show as we start headlines as well. Our first guest, good to have the former comptroller of the city of Philadelphia, Mr. Alan Butkovitz, is in the studio. So look at the camera and say hello to everybody.
Hello, how are you?
All right, so we're going to start the conversation first with all the candidates. There are a couple questions I wanted to ask each of you relative to some questions from the audience that they wanted answered, and then we'll get into a question and answer, and then we'll hear specifically from you as the candidate. So as we start the conversation, how do you propose to deal with the issue of crime and gun violence if elected mayor of the city of Philadelphia in the city?
Well, first of all, we got to get rid of stop and frisk, because that makes it impossible for the community to work with the police. It sets them up as opposing armies. Secondly, the stuff that Benny Swans and all the crisis intervention people discovered back in the 60s about when they negotiated peace treaties between the gangs and about intervening in children's lives at an early stage, and something that they call focused deterrence now. Philadelphia keeps discovering that over and over again and keeps discarding it because I guess it's relatively expensive. They tried to do this in the 24th Police District 20 years ago, and they found out that they were able to cut murders because you would figure out who the people are who are most likely to be murder victims or perpetrators. You would work with them, job counseling, job placement, all of that. It was also done on a larger basis in the city of Philadelphia, shepherded by the district attorney's office. And yet we keep moving away from that. And on top of that, we have to have an adequate police force that is under control, that isn't hassling everybody, but which should be focused on finding and confiscating guns. I hear that there are houses in Philadelphia where you can rent a gun for an hour. And that's the kind of thing that you should have a lot of undercover operations on, a lot of intelligence. You should be getting probable cause for search warrants, and you should make it unprofitable and very inconvenient for those people to be dealing in Philadelphia. It's similar to the situation with drug trafficking. Often the police know where the open air trafficking is, but it's the question of committing the manpower and the follow-up to root it out. Often in the city they get moved from one place to the other, and the police decide that we'll let them set up camp here. It's amazing. You know, there's been a couple of murders in Center City, and they have received a lot of notoriety. But if the volume of homicides that's going on throughout the city is happening in Center City, there would be no question that it would be identified as the #1 crisis in the city, and it really should be.
And I my promise to myself is that I would not interrupt any of the answers. But what do you then assess the difference between, you know, the outlying communities outside of Center City versus Center City?
The media always expresses greater shock when there's a white victim or when it's in an affluent white neighborhood. And there's kind of a shrug of the shoulders and the assumption to take it for granted in minority neighborhoods. And
as mayor, how would you address that issue? Would you speak to that issue? As mayor, what happens with that analogy, if that's the perception, or that is part of the reality?
I think one of the things you have to do with the police department is you have to fight the deeply entrenched cynicism that many police officers have built up over years. They've seen everything, they've experienced everything, and a lot of them have formed hardened opinions about people or different kinds of people. And that means you need to bring in different leadership, and you have to bring in different lower level leadership, and you have to start making it a clear thing. You just have to root out the cynicism. We have exactly the same problem with public school teachers.
So is it fair or safe for me to say, or so, that there could possibly be a change at the office of commissioner if you elected mayor?
Yes, I mean I was a very strong enthusiast with Charles Ramsey. I've always liked Richard Ross personally. I don't think his performance is up to what Ramsey was doing. And I'm not sure if it's because of Ross or whether it's because Mayor Kenny interferes so much with Ross's management of the department. He seems to trot out Commissioner Ross when he wants cover, or say that the police department is responsible for the decision that draws fire, and then he's into it again.
Are you suggesting that the commissioner, per the mayor, is a puppet?
I'm suggesting that the mayor has not given Commissioner Ross his head and his freedom to do everything that Ross, in his judgment, would do as a police officer. I think there's been a couple of times where there have been public contradictions and a yanking on the chain by Mayor Kenny. I don't think Mayor Kenny is a law enforcement guy. I think Richard Ross is a career law enforcement guy.
So would you be comfortable with him if elected mayor to be your commissioner?
What I want to do is have a deep conversation with Commissioner Ross and make sure that my perceptions of this, that he can be a better commissioner than Mayor Kenny's allowing him to be, are accurate.
Oh. Question number 2. Your position on the soda tax. If elected, would you revisit the soda tax or your current position on the soda tax?
Yeah, I would repeal the soda tax. It's a punitive tax for no reason. This city has gotten into the habit of picking out small groups of businesses or people and taxing them heavily and figuring that there's no problem because 51% of the people were left alone. So it's not just the soda tax. We have a stormwater fee that is driving all the auto dealerships out of Philadelphia. When they raise that fee, they raise some fees from $800 a month to $4,000, and then the biggest one, Arco Refinery, by $380,000 per month in their stormwater rates. This is something that is...
Now, explain what the stormwater rates are. What is that?
During the Nutter administration, the mayor signed a deal with EPA for expensive expansion of our stormwater treatment plant, and the city decided that they were going to assign costs in a different way than they used to, so that the city said that rainwater that runs down the side of a skyscraper isn't costing anybody anything because it had to go down anyway. But on horizontal land, they said that it's horizontal, right? If I'm going side to side, right? That you're a bad person if you don't have big cisterns or grass, and that you should have known there's going to be all that rain. So they decided...
With the potential of flooding.
Yes, so they decided you should be charged more on the basis of the amount of square footage that you have rather than on the size of the pipe.
Is that for businesses and homeowners?
Yes, yes. So a lot of the African American churches are being pushed close to insolvency by that very rule because they have parking lots. And under the city's view of things right now, you're a bad person if you have a parking lot, because the parking lot is concreted over.
Well, let me shout out everybody with the parking lot. Thank you for the parking lots. Whatever we can do to save parking lots, yeah. I'm for it.
So you had that. You had the actual fees on parking lots. There's been a series of regulations and fees and taxes that the city's done.
And you would look to address that issue?
I told Mayor Kenny when he brought this up in the first place, when Nutter tried it, it eventually went to a small increase in the real estate tax. You're talking about $20 million a year for pre-K, which is a very manageable figure. But really what Kenny has done is he's disguised his money grab behind the children. Because $20 million is a very small portion. Well, if he's
grabbing it, what is he doing with it?
He's using
when you say it's a money grab, you're saying he's grabbing it. I would think you're saying he's grabbing it and doing something else with it, and for the children as a cover.
That's right. That's right.
I'm not saying that. Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying. Half of it, more than half of it, is used for general city expenses. Only about a third to a quarter of it is being used for the school programs, although Kenny says that those will be expanded. More of it is being used for the so-called rebuild program, which is this plan to revamp playgrounds around Philadelphia that is being used for schools. However, there is no rebuild program. The mayor just had 2 so-called ribbon cuttings, which really involved raking the ground and marking off 2 tennis courts. That's not a ribbon cutting. He's collected money on the soda tax for rebuild for 3 years. He hasn't got it off the ground because Council President Darrell Clark, Councilwoman Cindy Bass have rightfully pointed out that nobody in their right mind would do a $500 million public works project in Philadelphia without using it as a hammer to get access into the construction trades for minority African Americans.
Well, you, former comptroller, finance man, there has to be some accountability. It has to be some kind of ledger for how that money is being spent. can't at some point the citizens, city council, or the like look at that soda tax money and see how that money has been spent?
Well, actually, my successor, Controller Rebecca Reinhardt, who beat me in the election, actually did that study a few months ago. And she's the source of a lot of this. The majority of it isn't being used for what it's supposed to be used. You know, Philadelphia nearly went bankrupt in 1991, and we're under certain state regulations now. We have to do 5-year financial plans. One of the things that was most stunning to me is that last year Mayor Kenny had a plan that said this year he expected 5% more to come in from real estate taxes. Instead, he got 11% more. He got twice as much in as he thought. A lot of people were overtaxed, and it was wrong. He tried to get an extra 5% because he said we were going to run out of money. He tried for a 15% tax increase. He got 11. And at the end, he said at the beginning of the year he needed the money because we were going broke. At the end of the year, he announced he had $380 million more than he ever thought he was going to have. That's not supposed to happen. If that happened in a business, somebody would get fired. It's just as bad to end up with an extra $300 million as short. Simply, Kenny just doesn't know what he's doing on money. Remember, they spent a whole year chasing around trying to figure out where $33 million was.
Yeah. And to that, I was going to ask that question later, but to that $33 million, elected in 2005 as the comptroller, some of that happened under your watch. How did that happen?
We have a $5 billion a year budget. So every year that I've been the controller, we said that the finance department was understaffed, undermanned, that they violated basic provisions. For example, the same person in the department who orders supplies is not allowed to sign for them and acknowledge it because that encourages theft. The city has been running bare for as long as I was controller. You look at every single report we ever did to the city on an annual basis. Our complaint was always there. The city always said that they were working on it. We didn't have the power to make them do it.
Now, Rebecca Reinhardt, the current controller, did say that, to your credit, that there was an opportunity to be able to look at that, and it came to light under her new administration, and it's pretty much been reconciled. What is it, 17 accounts that the city has an estimated 17 accounts, and now there's just short, they've found like the 32 million last report that I read.
And it's a symptom. It's a symptom. Look, when Nutter left office, there was a decision that the Provident Mutual Insurance Company would be the new police headquarters. The city could buy it for $10 million. They put $52 million into it, and now they're going to sell it for $10 million.
At a loss.
Meantime, Kenny signed a contract with Bart Gladstein for the old Inquirer building to put the police headquarters there, and they're not putting $52 million into it, they're putting $180 million into it. So first of all, before you sit down and decide where the police headquarters is going to be, did you make a budget decision that you're going to spend $52 million or you're going to spend $180 million? Is there a really good reason why we need to spend $180 million to renovate a police headquarters? And remember, that area around 52nd and Market Street was devastated by the repairs on the L for years. Many businesses under the L and near the L were put out of business. So this was a promised restorative economic thing in West Philadelphia, that they were going to build a police station. It was going to be guaranteed customers for restaurants and so on. And then to just walk away after the contract has been signed is disrespectful, and it's disrespectful of what the value of people's money is. They make decisions like this all the time.
So if your suggestion is that making this purchase of the former Inquirer building, then the estimate of how much the soda tax would bring in, that there are just some fly-by-night financial decisions being made, is not the city council, should there be, in your opinion, to be mayor, interested to be mayor, that there should be some oversight by the city council? Do you think that they're doing a good job at this point overseeing some of those financial decisions made?
Actually, I think the city council is doing a better job than the mayor is, because, for example, Darrell Clark and council prevented Kenny from doing that extra 5% tax increase this past year. They were right, he was wrong. He has more money to spend on finance people. He's got more of a handle, supposedly, in the finance thing. And the fact that Darrell Clark and Matt Stitt and the staff people over in council had to catch that error is to their credit. I think we've had similar disagreements over things like the police station. Council is, in my opinion, they're pretty receptive to the complaints and the grumblings that people give about property tax assessments and other tax increases. And Mayor Kenny seems to be a little bit more imperial. I know in the campaign we can never get him to sit down with us, and I think he's in a bubble. So and he rehired a lot of the finance people from another administration, so they haven't been in for 4 years, they've been in for 12 years, without any fresh eyes looking at anything. So I think it's a real surprise to me, because I thought when Kenny came into office that he said the right things, and I thought he was going to be much more rigorous about being a steward of people's money. But it seems to be anything goes, and unfortunately that is a deja vu moment for me, because I've experienced all that with the school district over the last 20 years. And there were times when they were rolling in money, and they took it and they put it as a down payment on a new Cadillac, and then they ran out of money.
Yeah.
And I don't want to see the city fall into the same trap.
My guest, a candidate for Mayor of the City of Philadelphia, Alan Butkovitz, is my guest. Final question that I will ask each of the candidates: the safe injection sites. In 2018, there were 257 deaths in the City of Philadelphia. That is extremely high. That number has kind of dwindled just a little bit. One, do you support safe injection sites? If you do or you don't, why?
I don't think there is such a thing as a safe injection site. I think that the city is going to take co-sponsorship of a program where people are encouraged to come in and slowly kill themselves. I think heroin is an extremely dangerous drug. I think we need higher dosages to get any kind of high out of it. I think the majority of it in this area is contaminated by fentanyl, and that really it's like hanging the sign out there saying, come in and safely kill yourself. And in the process, it's going to bring in drug dealers and the people who are going to use guns to fight over corners, because this is going to be a very valuable piece of real estate near the injection site or sites. So I remember an incident where a 3-year-old boy was murdered because he was sitting on the sofa in his house and bullets came through the windows during the gunfight. So what about those lives? What about safeguarding people who want to live in their neighborhood and don't think that they should be hostages?
Would you as mayor look to shut those sites down?
Yeah, I think we need more rehab centers. We need to use the district health centers, more
mental health centers,
and mental health centers also. Look, anybody who's got a relative who's got a mental health problem knows how frustrating the laws are for you to try to get help for somebody. You virtually have to catch them right in the act of committing suicide or something to get any kind of help. And I understand why people feel helpless, that they've got loved ones that they cannot reach into their head and who don't recognize that they're in the throes of addiction. But we can afford to put more money into more comfortable facilities and do more outreach to the people in addiction, because that phrase, we got to do something, therefore let's do this, has preceded many of the worst mistakes in history.
So, my final question for you. Running now, seeking the office of Mayor of the City of Philadelphia, unsuccessfully, seeked another term. You were unseated, but now decides to run for mayor. What have you learned in the interim that you may or may not do differently now seeking the highest office in the city?
You know, the ironic thing about that is that I pretty much decided to run for mayor the night I lost for controller, because the biggest lesson I learned is that Philadelphia politics is not as controlled as it used to be. I think the machine is still powerful, too powerful. There's a lot of people pressing candidates for money set 2 and 3 times, but the voters are becoming more resistant to grabbing pieces of paper from somebody and following the list. And I think one of the reasons Reinhardt was elected is because people, well, first of all, there was an appetite for more women in government, and secondly, people wanted change. They wanted new faces. And Jim Kennedy has been in office for 30 years, and he's always been part of the power structure, either part with Vince Guillermo or owned by John Doherty. So I believe that hunger for change is also going to be a powerful force in moving him out of the mayor's office.
All right. Mr. Alan Butkovitz is my guest. Here's your opportunity to tell the voters of the City of Philadelphia why you should be the next mayor of the City of Philadelphia.
Well, really, the shame of Philadelphia is its high ranking as the biggest high-poverty city in America. And a lot of lip service has been given to this idea of fighting poverty by Mayor Kenny and by other city leaders, but they don't put their money where their mouth is, and there's no seriousness to it. There's this thinking that the industrial economy is dead, that you have to have a PhD or a graduate degree now. And we know that there's a lot of churning going on in the area of ocean-going traffic and cargo. Philadelphia has a port that could be competitive with New York and with other nearby ports. There's an extreme appetite for port expansion in Philadelphia, and yet we're using our port-adjacent land for Walmarts, for dog grooming studios, for condominiums, so people can say this is nice, people used to work here. When in fact we should be maximizing the potential for cargo jobs, which a 2007 study showed that we had the potential for 25,000 more longshore jobs in Philadelphia. And as the president of Longshoremen, Boise Butler always said, if you would show up for work at 4 in the morning and come back tomorrow at 4 in the morning and pass a urine drug test, you could make $50,000, and in 5 years you could make $100,000 at overtime. And there is no problem in Philadelphia that wouldn't be solved with 25,000 more people having $100,000 jobs, and not telling them that they missed their chance because they didn't finish high school, or the economy is changing, or will have access to the economy when the children that are in preschool today grow up in 20 years. That's not the answer. That requires a laser-like focus by the mayor and the city government, because there's a lot of battles to be fought in that. You have to fight with the real estate interests. You have to fight with the people who have other ideas about how to use that land. You've got to fight with New Jersey and with Delaware because they want their ports to benefit rather than Philadelphia. You can't have a vision like that and say, oh, well, nobody got together, nobody agreed, I'm going to go home. That had, when the textile industry went out of business in Massachusetts, they made a decision to be high tech. When the auto industry collapsed, there was a decision that we need to bring this back, or this area of the country is going to die. Mm-hmm. So Philadelphia is always kind of open to, I don't know, should we have Disneyland at 8th and Market, or maybe we could have Amazon. They say if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. Philadelphia has a foundation in the port ever since William Penn stepped off the boat. We have anchor institutions in Philadelphia, colleges, universities, medical schools. When I was controller, we pioneered an effort because they spend $6 billion a year. And we brought about a cooperative arrangement with them so that they'd open their books, show the products that they need, and commit to a 25% increase in what they're going to buy from Philadelphia companies so that we get a medical laundry in Philadelphia, which we don't have, et cetera, et cetera. The answer to poverty is more good-paying jobs that match the skills and the experience of the people that we have here in Philadelphia.
Yeah. So how do you propose, as we get ready to close the interview, numbers of young people that I talk to that are born, raised, educated here in the city of Philadelphia? Clearly there are people who come to the youth pens and temples and the like from other regions of the country. But how does Philadelphia also engage its next generation to feel a part of Philadelphia and leave, go away to college, and come back?
Well, obviously that requires a focus on good schools and more parental involvement in schools, and not accepting substandard schools. But also, interestingly, Philadelphia has an asset in this fight, which is that people are getting worn out in New York. Not only are they getting worn out by the cost of living, but they're getting worn out because you can't start a business in New York. If you're not big, you can't even get off the ground. And there's been a trend in Philadelphia for a lot of entrepreneurs and technology people to come here because it's the right size city. So we got to make sure that it is still seen as a safe city. The areas where people are flocking, whether University City or Society Hill or South Philadelphia and so on, it's as if they've discovered a new country. Well, we got to stop rolling over the people that are being moved out of those neighborhoods and make sure they got their rights are being protected. Mm-hmm. We have to make sure that it's a safe area. And we have to take no nonsense, no excuses, not just change the grading system or the goalposts, but really have good schools in Philadelphia.
Great. It's a pleasure. Let people know how they could reach you.
Yes,
we're at
www.alanformayor.com. On Facebook, we're at Alan Butkovitz, Butkovitz, and I can be reached at 215-370-2448.
Pleasure to meet you.
Same here.
Thank you. Democratic candidate for mayor, Alan Butkovitz.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Okay.